And now on the line is Paula Leonard. Paula is the CEO of the Alcohol Forum. Paula, welcome back to Near FM.
Thank you.
Okay, Paula, we're going to talk mostly today about one area, and it is not actually about alcohol, but about gambling. As it has been a few months since our last interview about gambling, Paula, can you remind our listeners as to how or why you are interested in this area when it is officially outside your brief with the Alcohol Forum?
Yeah, I suppose it's an interesting one, but, Alcohol Forum Ireland and the Irish Community Action and Alcohol Network, we have, over the last numbers of years, been involved in challenging, I suppose, the corrosive and really negative and health-damaging impacts that the alcohol industry is having on our health, on our education, on our health policy in Ireland, and also working with people right across the globe on that issue. And it's become really apparent to us that really what the alcohol industry is doing and their corporate strategy to increase profit comes at a cost, and that cost is health and well-being. And when you look at the gambling industry, it is very similar, and it is moving at speed. And its one goal is profit. So it has very similar mechanisms and very similar ways of working to the alcohol industry and indeed the tobacco industry and other health-damaging industries. But in a narrow sense, the reason that we were very disappointed to hear that sort of the Gambling Awareness Trust was now funding awareness talks in our schools was because the Alcohol Forum Ireland and the Irish Community Action Alcohol Network, we had fought really hard in a campaign to make sure that schools-based education in Ireland was free from alcohol industry influence. But that campaign and those arguments all focused on the rights of children and the rights of children to have independent and value-based education, information on a range of sort of health issues and, their own well-being. And it really wasn't good enough for us that we had closed the door on Drink Aware in Irish classrooms, and here the Gambling Awareness Trust with a very similar model, very similar risks in terms of health and well-being and links to addiction in later life. We're now trotting into schools under the guise of work that they're sponsoring through family resource centres in Ireland. And that really was the narrow field, I suppose, that we then worked with policy experts, research experts, commercial determinants of health experts, people who really understand and know what global corporations are up to and the lengths that they're willing to go and the costs to health that they're willing to sacrifice to maximise their profits. So, over 50 individuals, organisations and experts from across the globe last November wrote to the Taoiseach to outline our concerns in relation to the speed that the gambling industry is becoming very influential in the lives of children in Ireland, of families in Ireland and of communities in Ireland. And, at the moment the government is still debating the Gambling Regulation Act, and there's a lot of concerns being raised about that, but I suppose we will continue to voice our concerns in relation to children, children's well-being and children's education.
You mentioned the family resource centres there. The Gambling Awareness Trust, or Stroke Gambling Care as they call themselves also, they're actually doing education programmes in family resource centres and in schools as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and I suppose this was one of the things that, when we had ran the campaign in relation to Drink Aware being removed from Irish schools, the HSE, the Department of Education and the Department of Health all came back and were very clear and made a very clear statement that, Drink Aware materials and Drink Aware teacher training programs should not be used in Irish schools. So when we did receive a letter back from the Taoiseach in relation to our letter of concern, he has cited, schools, he has cited the circular that the guidelines say that, parties with conflict of interest should not be used. And unfortunately, that sort of a vague statement, while it's very welcome, that sort of a vague statement doesn't bring enough clarity. I have great respect for family resource centres. I was involved with one of them myself many years ago. They provide fabulous supports right across Ireland to, largely underserved communities and underserved sections of our community. But they have entered into an agreement with the Gambling Awareness Trust that is 100% funded by the gambling industry. It is 100% funded by the gambling industry. Therefore, its goals are not benign, they're not driven by health, they're not driven by well-being, despite all of their glossy materials and their rhetoric. The goal of the gambling industry in funding agencies like the Gambling Awareness Trust is to increase profit and to seek sort of light touch regulation by governments. So their argument is, well, actually, do you know what? We're in schools, we're giving out money for addiction services, we're mopping up the harm, so therefore really strong regulation is not needed. And what we're saying to government is, do you know what? You already had a circular that said any organisations with conflicts of interest shouldn't be in schools. It didn't go far enough. Schools didn't heed it. You had to come out and step up, and you had to name Drink Aware. And in this instance, we're saying that government is going to have to show the same kind of leadership, like really strong and clear leadership, and they're going to have to call it out, and they're going to have to say that organisations funded by the gambling industry, organisations funded by the Gambling Awareness Trust, should not be in Irish schools. Their materials should not be in Irish schools. Their charities that they fund should not be in Irish schools. And family resource centres who are taking money from the Gambling Awareness Trust should not be doing awareness raising with either children or parents in this country.
Would you view it as that there has been any progress since November, Paula?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the HSE, to be very fair to them and to celebrate, what they do, the HSE have shown some leadership on this. So, for example, they have got 1.5 million in 2023 and 0.5 million in 2024 to develop pilot gambling initiatives and gaming initiatives in community healthcare organisations. And they have very clearly said that organisations that are in receipt of any funding from the Gambling Awareness Trust or from the gambling industry are not eligible to apply for that funding or to be co-funded under those pilot initiatives. So they are showing leadership on those things, and that's really welcome. But, I think it's up to us, that's our job as advocates and as community, voluntary and charity organisations, to be a watchdog and to say where the gaps are and to say, okay, you've shown some leadership, but you now need to go further.
So are you calling on the government to issue a circular or a couple of specific ministers, or what's the story?
Well, I think actually when it comes to schools-based education in relation to health, the HSE have a role, the Department of Education have a role, and the Department of Children have a role. So I think that, it needs to be at the level of the Taoiseach, it needs to be at the level of Cabinet, there needs to be strong leadership and strong guidance issued on this matter. And while we have lots of concerns around the speed that the gambling industry is moving, that gambling advertising is moving, that, gambling addiction is on the increase in this country, I suppose the bite-sized chunk and the cherry that we're picking right now is we're saying not in our schools, not on our watch, and not to our children.
I saw an ad a few months ago on social media. I'm not sure if it was from Gambling Care, but it was some gambling organisation anyway, and they were saying if you have a problem, they were saying words to the effect, if you have a problem gambling, the aim isn't to stop gambling, it's to be in control of it. Whereas I've heard Barry Grant from Extern say that the vast majority of people that he deals with in Extern who have a problem gambling want to stop gambling 100%. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I suppose it's one of the issues for any addiction is availability, and we now have 24-hour availability of gambling online. We have it heavily marketed. We have advertisings on our phone, on our screen, on the radio. It's now advertised on iPlayer. All of those things are this constant environment that is, promoting something that is highly addictive and it's available all the time. So I think, what we need to see is actually strong leadership on this, and we need to see sort of population level exposure to advertising and access to gambling opportunities reduced. That needs regulation.
Okay, so it needs regulation. So it is great news that we are, it looks like in the not too distant future we're going to have the Gambling Regulation Act. That's great news, isn't it?
It is great news. Let's see where the devil is in the detail. But it's great that it's been debated, and, more action and more movement on it would be very welcome.
Okay, Paula, just to come towards the end of our interview, there's probably going to be a general election, there will be within the next year, and the gambling regulation bill is going through the Oireachtas. It's done most of its stages. Do you think there's any kind of ideal kind of time over the next few weeks or months before the general election that you hope that the government will actually do something about this?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I really think that we need to see a couple of things happen, and I suppose with my hat on in relation to Alcohol Forum Ireland, we would love to see the intoxicating liquor bill slowed down, but we would love to see the gambling regulation bill over the line, and, with good regulation, good protections, and for all of the people, and particularly young people in this country that are gambling at very worrying rates. Strong action and strong leadership on it. And I think really even people who are running for local election, they need to consider what their position is on this. They need to talk to their constituents, because if you talk to constituents on the doorstep, people are really worried about this. They're really worried about the level of debt that people can get into really quickly with gambling. So it's a very live issue for people. And I think we need to see answers on that, and we need to see a society where we're protected from that.